Hello, my dear ones. We are almost at Christmas, and I want to share with you something. You could call it a tool, you could call it a trick, you could call it whatever you wanted to call it. But there's a way in which I try to balance within myself the relationship between loving God and fearing God. And there's a reason why I want to address this with you today as we approach Christmas. In many ways it feels almost as if Christmas, the feast of the Nativity of the Lord, is a light feast. Amongst all the great feasts of the year, this seems to be the lightest, the one that's the most joyful, the one that's the most, easy to approach without fear. And there is something wrong in that, just as there is something wrong in the way in which we approach, the feast of Christ's crucifixion, for instance, on Holy Great Friday, with such tremendous fear and almost a distance between us and God, forgetting that this is the same God whom we celebrate at Christmas, whose birth we celebrate at Christmas. It is in fact this that I want to share with you, this way of remembering oneself as you approach Christmas, that the little babe in his mother's arms, the little babe that is born for our sake, is the same being, the same grown-up man who will be crucified for us on Holy Great Friday. And there is a way in which we must balance within ourselves the love and the instinctive desire to embrace and be embraced by this loving child, and also the fear, the paralyzing fear that we feel, or at least we should feel, in relation to the one who is crucified on a cross for our sakes because of our sinfulness. There's a way, actually St. John in the ladder, there's a way he speaks of where we have to grow into the discernment of when should we remind ourselves of God's love, and when should we keep before the eyes of our spirit God's punishment and His judgment. And it is in the way in which we learn to balance these things, in this discernment of what is more spiritually profitable for me at any given moment, to remind myself of God's righteousness and His judgment, or to remind myself of His eternal love and ability to forgive everything. It's in this discernment that our salvation is played out. The same God, the same dreadful, frightening, fearful being that has created heavens and earth, the same God who makes mountains shake, the same God who can make us be eternally or let us collapse into the nothingness of His forgetting about us. This same God is in that tiny little babe in His mother's loving embrace. And we should not allow ourselves to be so corrupted by this secular cutesying up of Christmas, where it's all about a young mother and his cute little child, and nothing beyond that. This cute little child made heaven and earth, and it is before this cute little child that we shall stand in judgment one day. And this same babe will be the one who, based on our own behavior and deeds, on our faith and our intentions, and above everything else, based on His love, on who he is, because he is love, it is this same babe that will judge us and determine our eternal fate. It's very important to distinguish this because we are fallen beings. It is almost impossible for us to hold within ourselves absolute fear, absolute dread, as we should feel when we are faced with God himself, the creator of all that is, the only being that is, that exists in and of himself. And the joy, the love, the hope that should make us feel almost drunk at the thought that such a being could love us so much that he humbles himself to the degree of becoming creation. Think about it. The creator becomes creation. The one without any sorts of limit becomes limited in space, in time, in body, for our sake. If the thought of God himself putting himself on a cross for our sake inspires fear, godly fear in you, then how much more should this act of extreme, otherworldly love and humility of the Creator becoming creation, so that the story of our salvation could start and eventually be accomplished, how much more should this act of extreme love and humility inspire fear in us? Of course, this is the season of joy. Of course, this is the feast of joy. But what is joy? Don't confuse the joy, the spiritual joy of the saints, the joy that the apostles are talking about, and the joy we feel when we receive a gift, or the joy we feel when anything good happens to us. If you look at the saints of the first centuries, for example, whenever they had a vision of God, which is the ultimate joy that a human being could experience, whenever they could see Christ, they collapsed in terror to the ground. And closer to us, Saint Seraphim, my Saint Seraphim, when he was a deacon and he saw Christ during the divine liturgy entering the altar with the angelic beings, he was so struck with fear that he could not move. He literally became paralyzed in the middle of the service. He could not move at all. He could not say anything. Instead of saying the prayers as he was supposed to do, he just stood there, motionless and quiet, overcome with the joyful terror or the terrifying joy of having seen Christ himself. And they had to come out of the altar and to just carry him inside. And they waited for him to come back to himself before he could share with them what had happened. Or Saint Silouan, a contemporary saint of ours, Saint Silouan the Atenite, who speaks about experiencing God as being possessed by God, being possessed by such a being that, he says, had that experience been prolonged by a second more, I could not have survived it. So I'm not certain, and I'm being kind here, I'm actually completely certain that what we call joy is not the joy of the saints. It's not the joy of actually contemplating, let alone living in a real experience, a vision, a meeting with the Lord. This sort of joy should be the joy of a Christian in relation to Christmas, the whole season and the feast itself. Do not forget at any given moment that this babe in a manger, this babe in the loving embrace of his mother, is the same God who is our maker and our judge. And with this knowledge, approach that child and address your prayers to that child. We need to learn, as St. John of the Ladder teaches us, we need to learn never to let go of God's love, perfect, otherworldly, ultimate love and forgiveness. And at the same time, the feeling of dread that creation, and we are all nothing but creation, we are nothing but nothingness held into being by creation, by the Creator. This dread of creation contemplating His, her Creator. Rejoice, for the Lord is being born for us, my beloved ones, so that all our nothingness, all our sinfulness, all our darkness could be forgotten, erased into non-being, and so that we may partake of the Creator's very being, and we may be one with Him in eternity. That's the joy that a Christian should feel at this time. All my love to all of you out there, with all those whom you keep in your hearts and in your prayers. Be blessed, be blessed, be blessed